Hello and welcome. Today we're going to talk about Fire Emblem 7 Chapter 20 Hector Mode, Dragon's Gate. I am Pandan, and this chapter is often cited as one of Fire Emblem 7's strongest chapters. I think if you ask anyone who's played this Fire Emblem 7 ROM hack by Intelligence System, the Blazing Blade, they would, I bet you probably half of its players would cite this chapter as their favorite, if not one of their favorites from the game, which is a pretty high regard. And I think if multiple types of players all like this map, IS must have done something right. And especially, I think Fire Emblem Blazing Blade, it's fallen out of fashion in recent years. I feel like it's become kind of fun to hate on it, which is really sad because it was a darling of the community for so long. And I feel like now public perception on it has really turned in the community. While it's still a great entry for beginners, I think more tenured fans tend to find its gameplay less exciting overall. But this chapter, in spite of it all, is still, I think, even among its detractors, regarded quite well. And if your detractors can regard you quite well, then you must be doing something good. So let's talk about what this map does well to create a memorable, fun, and challenging gameplay experience that I always look forward to, at least every time I play FE7, and many others do as well. So before we get into the gameplay aspects, let's talk about the story itself. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with FE7, I'll do a quick summary of the story here and what's happening. So some spoilers incoming. And this chapter, it serves as a bit of a conclusion in the first major arc of Eliwood and Hector's tale. And it namely involves defeating the traitorous Lord Darren of Laos, who has been working with the Black Fang, or really more like being manipulated by the Black Fang. He's a bit of a stooge and a doofus. Spoilers. But Hector and Eliwood modes, they both start with Hector and Eliwood searching for Eliwood's dad, who has mysteriously disappeared. And through their travels, they learn that Elbert, Mr. Eliwood's dad, has been taken to the Dread Isle, aka Valor, at the Dragon's Gate, which is a portal to the world of dragons, where they've lived since the ancient War of the Scouring, which you can learn all about by booting up FE7 and not hitting the start button, or playing that one chapter in FE7X with the hero Heartmut, that long tutorial chapter, which is pretty neat. And so at this chapter, this is the last chapter before you find Elbert. He's in the Dragon's Gate, kind of behind where Darren's sitting at the top part of this map. And it serves as the climax of this first part of the game. To this point, you've probably played like 8 to 10 chapters of this mode, including guidance. And in many ways, it's really the peak. From here on out, many of the maps don't offer a lot of the same diversity and objectives and challenges, with many being slogs with weak enemies, lots of route maps, lots of big maps as you march towards the late game. And being one of the last strong maps certainly helps it stand out, but I think it's accentuated by its importance in the story and the resolution that comes after, with Eliwood and co. finding Elbert, Eliwood's dad, who along with Ephidel dies. Spoilers. So, conclusion to the first arc and what we've been working towards the entire game, adds a bit of narrative weight to it, and then after this, it's a bit of a turning point going into the last part of the game. And so, it's kind of like, you know, the concluding chapter to a first arc, which I think helps with the narrative weight and gives it a bit more to stick out in the player's mind. Now, not every chapter is going to have that narrative weight going for it, but it certainly helps enhance the experience a bit here. So with story out of the way, let's talk gameplay. And the first thing to notice is that this chapter offers quite a number of diverging pathways. There are multiple ways to work through the throne. As you can see, I only used one because I'm a scrub at Hector hard mode. And because there are multiple ways to work to the throne and rewards off to the sides, different corners of the map, it really encourages the player to fan out. We'll talk a little bit more about that and what that looks like. But one thing to note is that the chests on the top right of the map are under threat by Lego, who is a recruitable thief who nabs the chests and runs off to the top left. And additionally, a thief with the game's only member card appears running in the same direction. So it's pretty interesting. The thieves spawn from the bottom right corner of the map. They swindle the chests on the right side, and they try to exit through the left. And so you have an opportunity to cut them off, which is pretty interesting. And that's really the anti-turtle of the map. And figuring out the right path to take to cut them off is a fun challenge that encourages you to play quickly. So you have that center path with the doors you can see in the background here behind Oswin. And then you also have this longer path that takes you further left. So multiple ways to get up to the top part of this map to cut off the thieves, recruit Legal, and steal the member card. And that's pretty fun. But in your way, the map has Cameron, who is the paladin mini-boss, standing in front of Hector, and Oswin right now, as well as reinforcements coming from stairs at different points of the map, and pegs near Merlinus. So you'll really need to stretch out your resources if you want a chance at doing all of these things, keeping Merlinus alive so you can promote sooner, recruiting Lego, beating Cameron, and nabbing that member card. And because of all this, it's one of the most dynamic maps in FE7 with a lot happening all over the map, something to rush towards, and places to defend. As an aside, I'll note that beating Darren is super satisfying. The guy's been a real jerk throughout most of the game so far, and beating up on him is, I think, pretty satisfying as far as FE7 villains go. Is he a great villain? No. Is he a fun villain? I would say so. He's such a doofus, man. He's so stupid. But he gets totally bamboozled by the Black Fang, and then you just come and finish him off, which is, I guess, a satisfying conclusion. So, with that being said, what makes this chapter work is how many ways you can approach it. There is no one-size-fits-all solution, and compared to many of FE7's other maps, there isn't only one goal worth pursuing at a time. There are multiple goals and multiple paths to achieve these goals, giving the map quite a bit of replay value. Do I want to go up the left? Do I want to go up the right? Who do I want to send to recruit Lego? Who do I want to send to defend Merlinus? Who do I want to deploy? You have a lot of these different choices here in this map, and I feel like every unit can play a role here in contributing, which is great. However, despite this chapter being a standout in terms of story, action, and gameplay, it's not perfect, and there's a couple of things about this map that I would certainly look to improve, and so I think this chapter is a good model to look after, and it does a lot of things really well, but can always be improved. So what would I do to help improve this map if I was to remake it? Well, to start, as you've seen on screen, you can, and like in most chapters in FE7, be cheesed with a promoted Oswin, or you can cheese the map with a promoted Oswin, and Marcus is of course still dominant. The enemy quality in FE7 hurts the overall flow, pacing, and difficulty, but not nearly as much in others due to the soft timers involving the thieves. So while yes, you have some strong units and the enemies aren't that great, because of the speed with which you need to move, it's not as big of an issue in some of these other maps where there's nothing really pushing you forward and you just can kind of grind on some weak enemies with your buff units. What does make this tough, though, to get everything and to move quickly, is the number of one-tile chokes in this map. It's super easy to get into a jam, and while this is great for new players who just want to get a handle on things and maybe take on one enemy at a time, it also makes the map a lot easier to slow down. And so, while on one hand I do like that the player can get stuck if they're not careful with their positioning, but it also isn't really that fun to sit in one spot and take on a single enemy at a time. The enemy placement for Cameron and his crew mean that you're likely going to be taking all of them on with one or two units at a choke point, kind of like you can see what I'm doing right here. And it's going to make progressing more difficult. I know I'm not alone when I say that I like to move and groove through the map, and I find movement through the map very satisfying, and this chapter can really put a hard stop onto that because of how choky it is. And for you, HHM designer, avoid too many one-tile chokes. I'd probably widen both of these chokes here around where Cameron is to 2 wide to keep things a little more open and speed up the gameplay. My general view on one-tile choke points is that they're fine in moderation and that they're best when they're an alternative path to a more open route nearby, but now your only path to move forward. So providing multiple ways for your enemies to advance through, but not your only point, because trying to squeeze everyone through one tile choke really isn't very fun to move through or to play. In addition to that, with the choke points, the middle path, which you can see here I didn't bother with, doesn't really offer any incentive. There's no reason to go through it. And while it's certainly an option, given the chokiness on the map, you can speed things up by not log jamming your units as much, by fanning them out a bit more and maybe just being a bit more spread out. It really doesn't serve any purpose. You want to go left because of the chests, but going straight and then to the right, the exit of that room, ultimately takes you out of combat unless you move much faster through there and want to do some sort of diversion strat to get Cameron and co to the right, opening up the left for a quick shot at the chests on the left and thieves. But it feels a bit unorthodox and probably slower than charging up left with a halberd and going to town. Most of the chests to the middle room would solve... Moving one of the chests to the middle room, in my opinion, would solve this pretty quickly. Just making sure that the player has a reason to go down this path, I think would help. There are 2 chests in the top left room. Moving one of them to the middle room, I think would help with map flow a ton and encouraging the player to really split down the multiple paths that this chapter has set out. I think that would just help immensely. I guess one of the things you could do as it stands right now is, because of how choky it is, you can go up the middle room and like do some lobbing of magic or arrows over the wall strats, but the anime quality is so weak, you really don't need to. It's a pretty suboptimal route and doesn't really add anything or enhance the gameplay. You kind of send someone through, and yeah, they can deal with those mercs who are gonna who are spawning from the stairs, but they're gonna come out and wrap around anyway, and you can just deal with them then. So not much reason to go down this middle path, unfortunately. Although visually, it's nice, and having the option is nice. It doesn't really serve much purpose because there's no real benefit to doing so. So, to summarize real quick, if I was to remake this map, I'd make it more open and provide more incentive to take each of the paths in a single run. While the center path is an option, it's not a particularly rewarding one. I'd also move some of the enemies around and widen the choke points to make it less of a jam. The real key takeaway from this map is that having a lot of objectives to consider, limited resources to tackle them, and a reason to fan out helps make FE maps more dynamic. And this chapter helps showcase all of these different elements. Points to defend again, reasons to charge forward, a mini-boss that presents a challenge in the middle part of the map. There's a lot going on, and a lot of it's happening at once, so you have to keep your eye on the ball, so to speak. So for you as a hack ROM designer, I recommend studying this map to better understand really the art of anti-turtle, as well as the art of making split pathways and how to make them equal and engaging. Because there's a bit to learn here, I think, that we can all take away when we think about our own maps. So let me know down below what you think. I think this is a really well-designed map overall, especially in the context of FE7. I think some players might say it's one of the best maps in the series. It's certainly, I think, one of the best in FE7, but that doesn't mean it's not without its faults and not without its opportunities to improve. So curious to hear what you all think of this map, and if there's anything from it that you've incorporated into your own work, or anything about it that you like or didn't like that I didn't call out. I like these mages for Canasta grind though. That's always fun, as he gets like no experience. But yeah, we'll leave it at that then, lads. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Be safe.